This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where Coach and John learn along with you from some of the world's most decorated leaders. Recently promoted, let's sharpen the saw together.
Limitless Leadership Lounge is a conversation for young and emerging leaders. We love to bring on special leaders like the one that we have on today, who has written a really cool book. If you're getting value from these episodes that we're bringing to you here on the Limitless Leadership Lounge, be sure to make sure you're subscribing up on YouTube if that's where you're watching this, or on any of the podcast platforms, because we're in it for the long haul. We're coming up on 5 years having done this, and we're not stopping anytime soon. I'm John Goehring, joined as always by Coach Jim Johnson. Coach, we've had Dr. Nathanson on here before. Let's bring him back in because we're really excited to talk about his new book, Humanistic Leader.
We've done around 200 interviews, and there's only been a few repeat guests. So, Dr. Craig, you're in an elite group, and we're really looking forward to talking to you. John mentioned the book. I'm just going to share a little bit. Dr. Craig Nathanson is an educator, an author, speaker, and leadership coach. For over 25 years, he's helped people better lead themselves and others and build more human, sustainable organizations. Known for his signature humanistic leadership model, Craig brings a soulful, system-thinking approach to leadership rooted in self-awareness and purpose. He is taught in graduate and executive programs in the U.S., Vietnam, China, Indonesia, and Europe, and led workshops for professionals across industries and cultures. Craig is the author of multiple books, and the book that he sent John and I, and we both read and really enjoyed, is The Humanistic Leader for our YouTube audience. Without further ado, it's great to see you again, Dr. Craig. Welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Great to see you, Coach. I appreciate it. And John, always a pleasure to talk with both of you and to your audience.
Excellent. With that in mind, I'm curious because I hear this a lot in leadership, and I know you've brought it up. So I'm curious your thoughts on the difference between managing and leading.
I like to say that leading is selling tickets for the journey, getting people excited. If you've been in a big city in the tourist area, you always have those guys out there trying to sell you to sign up for a tour. So their only goal is probably to make commission, but they do this by inspiring, by getting you excited. And that's what leadership is about. But that's only 1/3, as I like to say. The other third is managing, which is the goal setting, the structure, the status quo. The opposite of leadership is management, but it's equally important. And I would say most people focus on the management side because it can be more efficient in the short term to promise someone a reward or threaten them with punishment. But if you don't have the leading and coaching part down, it falls apart. So there is a huge difference, but the main point, Jim, is it has to come from the same person.
Yeah.
And this really gets into the whole concept behind the book, right? The humanistic leader. It's a revolutionary concept. When we think of leadership, we don't often think of a human-centered leader. But tell us, what is a humanistic leader?
It's a person that puts people first, that realizes that whether you're a parent, a friend, a leader of a country, a coach, a boss in a company, it's all about relationships. If you have a good relationship with someone, the Pygmalion effect, they will rise to your expectations. But if you run over people or treat people like a widget or a cog in the wheel or just something to get work done, they're going to lower to that expectation. And then all they have left, they're not going to enjoy their work. And all they're going to have left is wanting to make more money. And if you've ever watched, for the younger audience, you won't relate to this story, but there's a very famous show many years ago called I Love Lucy. And there's a scene where she and her friend are on a candy factory, and their only job is to wrap the candy as it comes down the assembly line. And they're having a great time. But all of a sudden, the candy starts to go faster. And pretty soon, they're putting the candy everywhere, and they just fall on the floor and collapse. And that's what happens to most of us from when we just have managers.
Dr. Craig, I'm laughing with you because I do remember that scene because we're from the back in that era. I'm curious, how do leaders see the big picture? And this is two parts. And what is the big picture they should be looking for?
I think the word is sustainability. When I first developed the humanistic leadership model in 2015, the tagline was putting people over profit. And I really meant that because to make profit, you have to work with people, not over people. When the motto came out, many executives, when I taught workshops, had this, here's another guy that is not business oriented. And yet I really have always been business oriented. So I changed the tagline to something to the effect of people and organizational sustainability. So I think the big picture is sustainability, right? If you're a leader in a company and you want your organization to fundamentally make profit, then you have to make sure that it's around for the long time, for the long term. And so what do you have to do that? You have to grow, like growing a garden. You have to grow the people. You have to have good relationship with customers. You have to have a product that lasts long and so on. So I think that's part one. And part two, for the really self-aware leader, it's thinking bigger and broader and thinking that I have a responsibility to this home that we all call Earth, and that is to make sure that I leave it in a better place than I found it. And so if I'm trying to make money and at the same time I'm damaging my community, not affecting society in a positive way, then philosophically, I don't think that's a good idea. So I think the humanistic leader takes care of people, but also thinks of the big picture. This is why I love companies like Patagonia. Their mission is do no harm to the earth. I tell my students, I don't think there's a better mission statement out there.
Yeah, and a lot of your leadership concepts don't just come from a boardroom. This is the cool part where, a lot of leadership books that we read, all the great stories and the insights that they give are in professional environments. But in your book, certainly there are some of those, but then you also tell some personal stories about your dad, about your son. Maybe tell us one of those stories and how leadership for you has been about so much more than a work environment, but also your home life too.
I should say, John, that the approach I had with this book was to go back over my own life first. And there's a process I use where you scan through your life like you're looking at a movie. You're in the movie theater and you're watching your life. And it takes 30, 45 minutes. And you start with your earliest memories of a baby, and you pretty much just go through your whole life. And so I went through that process to try to think about what I've learned, the mistakes I've made, what will I have done differently if I had a chance, and then realize, I did the best I could at the time. And I went through my whole life, brought it up to current times. And that really informed me about why I feel the way I do about leadership, my thoughts. So I think that's an important self-awareness process for anyone. But I did that to help me ground myself into my philosophy of leadership. And of course, I included all of my stories. I wouldn't call this a memoir, but it definitely has all of my stories in it. I've given my book to all my family members. I don't think they'll ever read it, only because and it bothered me for a while. And then I finally realized after a lot of thought that they look at me as husband, dad. But when those close to us do something like this, it can be strange. So I'm over that. But as a result, though, I have a lot of cute stories of my family growing up. I think that out of all the stories, I like to tell the story of my grandmother, who I called Gam. When I was a little boy, she would just bring me little peanut butter sandwiches, and I would watch cartoons, and she was calm and sweet. And she'd say, Bagel, she called me Bagel. Bagel, are you happy? As a little kid, I didn't know what that meant. I said, yeah, sure, I'm happy. But she continued to ask me this her entire life. And shortly before she died, she was in a hospice and she was laying there. And I remember kissing her forehead. She'd passed away the next day. But she opened her eyes and looked at me as bright as possible. And she smiled and she said to me, let's see, I was in my early 40s. And she said, Bagel, Bagel, because I'm like, Gam, are you okay? Are you okay? I was very concerned. She didn't care about that. She said, Bagel, are you happy? And
Wow.
I'll never forget that. She passed the next day. And so what I learned from her was that ultimately we are responsible for our own happiness. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we cannot lead other people. So I think that the number one lesson in life that I learned through my own experiences, which I've built into my leadership model, is we have to be able to lead ourselves before leading others. And one of the main things to do that is to be happy. Happiness is subjective. Some of the main points of happiness from the researchers have been things like do things you enjoy, be around people that you enjoy, make sure you're moving forward and not backwards, and so on. And I think those are all true, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you're responsible for your happiness. And this is a philosophical note. As long as you're not hurting others, as long as it's, I think, healthy for you, but you have to be happy. And then you're present. You can be present for other people. So my GAM stays with me. She taught me a lot.
That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Let's delve a little deeper because I'm right with you. In fact, I always kid John about the fact that the first person you got to lead is yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your daily habits that's helped you lead yourself better, and maybe some advice or for a young leader? Because often as a young leader, they want to take the team or the organization to a higher level and they forget about themselves. And I think that's a big mistake that I learned early in my leadership career, is that making sure I take care of myself so I can take care of the people I'm leading.
Yeah, I would say for 30, 40 years, my routine is pretty much the same. I work 6 days a week because I love it. And my definition of work is doing what you love for most of the day and for most of your life. So to me, that it has nothing to do with money. It's doing what I enjoy. So why would I want to do that all the time? For 30, 40 years, I get up at 6 a.m. Back in the day, I was running marathons. So of course I would go for long runs. These days I walk, enjoy podcasts. It's better for my back, but I walk 5, 6, 7 kilometers in the morning, 30, 45 minutes. And I really enjoy that. I do a lot of stretching. I have a light breakfast, and then I hit my schedule, whether I'm teaching or coaching. But throughout the day, I'm stretching. I do meditation twice a day. I make sure I have a 20-minute nap. Studies show that if you take a 20-minute nap in the afternoon, even if you're just sitting quietly, it can give you back 2 hours of energy and productivity. I eat healthy, and I try to surround myself with people and work that I really love. I go to sleep 9:30 to 10 every single night, even on the weekends. I don't mess up my schedule, and I'm back up at 6. And I decided I'm really happy with my robot schedule, as my wife calls it, because it allows me to keep discipline in my life. So I think sleep and diet and exercise is key. If you don't take care of those things, then you're gonna fall apart. Jim, what we think about affects how we feel, which affects how we behave. And conversely, how we behave affects how we feel, which affects how we think. So we know now in science that your body is a system and everything is connected. That ties into the second part of my model, which is systems thinking. But the more we look at ourselves as a system and realize that it's all connected, we have to take care of ourselves. And I look around and I see so many people that don't take care of themselves, and then they become in leadership positions, and they're just not healthy enough to be there for people in spirit and mind and body.
What was the motivation for the humanistic leader model?
The original motivation, and I could say it changed in 2015, was for over 30 years, I've been teaching leadership, and I started to realize that all the textbooks said management. There were very few textbooks that
Mm.
said leadership, and the ones that did talked about leadership very differently from management. It reminds me back in the day, I won't tell you which year, in many corporations, you used to have three organizations. One was called Human Resources. They focused on compliance and rules and taking care of people. And then there was a group called Organizational Development. They were the experts, they thought, of developing the organization, but they didn't really pay too much attention to people. And HR never really paid too much attention to how the organization is formed. Then there was another group called Total Quality. Yeah, and total quality was formed after people like Dr. Deming and others who said it's all about measurement and quality. And they did a good job, but they didn't really pay any attention to people growth and certainly none of the HR policies. And so over the years, I realized there was such a separation. And then I started to read the literature, of course, over the last 100 years and realized that there was really a dichotomy between those that talked about leadership and those that talked about management. Nobody talked about coaching. So I went back and I spent 6 months looking at all the research that's ever been written on leadership and management, and I realized there was a gap. That prompted me, since I was teaching all of this, to say I'm gonna sit down and come up with a new model, not a new theory, but a new model. Because the last theory of leadership, transformational leadership, which is called, is from the late 1970s. So I decided to come up with something that maybe was more practical. But the more I thought about it, I stood back and I looked at the world and society, and I said, as a species, and it's not just me that said this, we're not on a road to sustainability. And so I wanted to create something that had a big impact for whether you're a parent, a friend, a coach, a leader of a country. So that's what's inspired me. And that was back in 2015. Now we're taping this in 2026, 11 years later. I look around and let's just say the world is not in a better place.
Mm.
So I have a sense of urgency now, way more than when I created this 11 years ago. And the nice thing is, I'll just say one more thing, is that the younger generation, Gen Z, kind of really resonates to this idea.
Let's talk a little bit. If you're coaching Gen Z, someone that maybe starting a leadership position, With the model that you have in place, narrow it down to a couple things you would give them to get off to a good start as a leader.
Treat yourself as your best friend versus your worst critic. I tell my younger students, Gen Z students, believe in yourself. Don't be afraid to speak out. So be your own best friend. Don't be afraid to speak out. And third, in fact, I taught a class on this yesterday at one of the universities I teach at in San Francisco. I taught my Gen Z students, don't worry about what other people think about you because you can't control that. All you can control is how you feel, how you think about yourself. And I said, that's good enough. And so those would be my 3 points.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful and so important for any of us. And we always need those reminders too throughout our lives too, that we can only control what we can control. My next question for you about leadership, you talk about the different styles of leaders in the book, and you list out some good things and bad things for all of these different, I believe there's 8 different styles of leaders.
Yeah.
Why don't we just run down just a couple of those different styles that stand out to you especially, and then how did you figure out all these different styles of leadership, and what did you most want the audience to know about them?
I figured them out from years of experience. I was in a corporate setting for a long time, lost track, over 30 years. And I think for each of these styles, whether it's task oriented or political or democratic, I had a boss like this. So I learned these styles from seeing these in action. And so then that got me to think about which ones are best, when should you use them. I started out with the idea that there's only a couple that are the best and the other ones are not too good. But over the years, I actually have changed my mind on this. I think in different situations, it's important to use different styles. If you have a fire, an emergency, you need an autocratic style. Tell people what they need to do. But if you're in a much calmer situation, you could afford to be democratic. Second question. So I've learned that the democratic and collaborative styles get the best results with people. And that is a combination of, I used to be democratic, which is I'm hands off, but I always wanted to make sure things were fair. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Maybe in some cases, let's vote. But over the years, I've learned that works best in combination with the collaborative style, which is sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and actually show people how to shoot the ball, right? Using a basketball analogy. So I tend to think those get the best results. The opposite spectrum is autocratic, tops down leadership. What I've learned over the years and observed is that those people that lead in autocratic ways do so for one of 3 reasons. They were raised by, I'm sure, loving parents who micromanaged them and said, this is exactly what you need to do. So they grow up, they become adults, they become leaders, and they micromanage people. Or number 2, autocratic leaders sometimes are not self-aware. Let's just leave it at that. If you push them, they fall. So they have this shield around them. And number 3, if you see an autocratic leader, just look at his or her boss and you'll see that they have an autocratic leader. And that's one of the sad realities of organizational life. If you want to be successful, you have to take on, this is important, the leadership style. Leadership styles are behaviors of your boss. Because if your boss thinks that you're supporting them, then you'll do well. If not, you won't do well. So I tell my students, if you're working for a boss who doesn't match your leadership style, you have one of 2 choices. You could just hopefully wait a year and they'll leave. Or you need to leave because you never want to compromise your values or your primary leadership behaviors. So there are 8 behaviors and we use them in different situations.
I want to circle back because you brought up Patagonia about their power of their mission, and you really thought that was good.
Yeah.
And I'm real big on mission. We developed a mission statement for our basketball program to develop winners on and off the court. And I always kid leaders that you're the CRO, you're the chief reminding officer of the mission. But I'm curious, how do you give advice on creating a mission and then having the leader making sure that the mission, that everybody's clear on it?
First, Jim, I think a lot of organizations are unclear about what a mission really means. There's the vision, which is where do we want to take this organization?
Right.
But the mission is what we do, how we do it, and who we service. So the mission of this hospital is to provide high quality care to the citizens of Cincinnati at a reasonable cost. So the mission statement should be crafted in a short amount of time. Organizations take way too long to do these. But I think to your point, what's more important, then you have to teach people about the mission. I always thought get rid of job descriptions and just give people a badge that has the vision, the mission, the values and then the expected behaviors and put them
Right.
on a small badge, and that's all you would need. And so I think to answer your question, it's one thing to write the mission, it's another thing to have leaders role model the mission. And I think it's like anything else, you have to educate people all the time.
Yeah. And so we talked about those different models of leadership too, circling back to that, because I did have one follow up on that. Can you change your style of leadership, and what does it take to change to, because so much of this is what was modeled to you either growing up or under the leader that you have. So what does it take for you to change that style of leadership to maybe something more constructive?
First of all, yes, you can change behavior. Another part of the model is what I call leadership traits. Now, traits are related to your personality. Personality is much more difficult to change. Your personality is wired from birth, but you can change behaviors. Similarly, with leadership styles, you can change behaviors. If you find yourself being too task oriented, on Monday mornings, you keep asking people about the project versus asking people how their weekend was. And you realize that after a while, as I write in my book, many stories about this, people, they comply, but you could tell something's missing. You go off and you reflect and you think, maybe I need to change my style. Maybe the reason is me that we're not getting good results here. So maybe instead of being autocratic, I don't know, I should be more humble. Maybe I should be a little bit servant leader, which is someone who sits back and asks, like, what can I do to help you? And so absolutely you could change. But it all links back to being self-aware. That's why self-awareness is at the top of the tier. Self-awareness is it's an ongoing journey our whole life to understand who am I? I am a person who, and what's important to me, and how do I show that on a daily basis? Most people are not self-aware just because we're by nature we're so busy, especially these days, scrolling. So yes, we can change, but it all comes back to first you have to be self-aware.
That's a good point. You talk about as a leader to be ask questions. So I'm curious, two examples would be, can you give us a few ideas on questions you would use in a one-on-one meeting? And then also questions you may use in a team meeting to really stimulate the thinking and to get the best communication going.
Yeah, great questions. That's the third part of the humanistic leadership model is coaching. I love coaching. It's the creative part. There's almost no wrong coaching questions you could ask if they're open-ended. The way the brain works, when you ask yourself a question, you get a brain synapse and it's impossible to not answer it. For example, before I answer your question, Jim, like right now, Jim and John in the audience, do not think of a green door. Do not think of a green. You're not listening
Oops.
to me. What are you thinking about?
A green door.
Yeah, because in order to not think about a green door, first you have to think about a green door.
Yeah. What is
So
a green door? Yeah. What am I
exactly,
supposed to not think about here? Oops, I thought about it.
Yeah.
exactly. So if you're in a coaching session, you ask someone like, okay, let's pretend that you resolve this problem. Tell me what you did. Let's go into the future when the problem is resolved, and let's look back and see yourself. Let's go into the future when the problem is resolved. Tell me what you did. What advice would you give to yourself in the present? If you had to ask, if you were someone else looking at you, what would you suggest? What resources haven't you used that might help you? The questions are unlimited that you could ask in a one-on-one situation. The key is not giving the answer, leading people to where they need to go. Now, in a group session, it's the same, but a little bit broader. Say you have a group of people in front of you, your team, you're trying to resolve some problem, some challenge. You might say, I would lead them in exercise. I would say, let's go into the future a year from now. Okay, it's a year from now. And now let's look back. First of all, let's go into the future. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell like? What does the environment look like? And then what are some of the changes that we did that allowed us to get to where we are? So you get people brainstorming in a future state, and then of course you take that information and you direct it back to the present with some solutions. I might do something like that. I used to have people do something called the nominal group process where I give everybody 6 dots and I say, all right, should we do A, B, or C? Everybody goes up to the board and you could vote your 6 dots wherever you want. And then I would weigh the results. And sometimes I would go with the team. And other times I would say, I really respect your ideas, but we need to do it this way, and here's why. You could put up blank pieces of paper on the wall and have everybody walk around and say, "This is what I would do, and here's why." Everybody just walks around silently, no judgment, and just reads. And there's a process you could build upon that. Studies show we use a very small portion of our brain. So any group exercise that you can do that stimulate creativity lowers the political, the peer pressure, the seniority pressure, I think is important.
We call it future pacing, right? Is trying to get them to imagine the future. So having to do with that, how do you guide say an employee or somebody that you're leading to be more optimistic about their future and their destination when somebody might not believe in themselves or just doesn't believe in the possibility of the future outcome?
Yeah, great question. We have to ask questions that we typically stay away from at work, in a work setting. John, what do you really want and why? Let's move forward 5 years in your life. Let's look around. What does, as I wrote in my second book, Perfect Vocational Day, what does your perfect vocational day look like? When do you get up in the morning? What are you doing? Where do you go? What do you want? What motivates you and why? And I could take that data, I could take your responses and help to guide you further. But we tend not to have these conversations at work. And we need to be more vulnerable at work as leaders. We need to be able to sit back and realize that your life is much more than this job that you're getting paid for. And I think as we break that down and we have more real conversations with people, like many leaders would think, then you might leave. No, I think conversely, you might stay because you're in an organization that cares about you. So
Yeah.
I think it's those kinds of questions.
Yeah. So as a leader, you're like also a self-awareness coach in a way. Is that what you're saying?
My students, if you read, there's something called Rate My Professor, where you go and you read reviews of professors. And it used to bother me, but no, I guess it doesn't. But a lot of students have said going to Professor Nathanson's class is like having therapy. And fine, but we can run with that. What's wrong with that? Having a mentor, having a coach, having a therapist. In fact, yeah, the more I think about it, I think a great humanistic leader is all of those things. Teacher, parent, therapist. Of course, I want to say I guess that's what AI is today, but that's what joke/truth. But yeah, I think it's all of those things.
So, Dr. Craig, how about for someone that's taking over and gets an opportunity to bring in some new team members? What advice would you give that leader in helping them pick the right team members?
But when people interview to bring new people into the organization, I think there's three words you have to think about: will, can, and fit. The first is, can the person do the job? And that's easy. You just look at their resume. You don't even have to talk to the person. You could tell they have the right skills that you're looking for. But more important is, will they do the job? In other words, are they motivated? Does this role fit into their plans for their future? When I interviewed, I used to ask people, how will this role get to where you want to go? And if they couldn't answer it, I didn't hire them. But Jim, the most important question is, how do they fit with the existing team? And this is a real leadership skill that you have to develop. You have to really think about, how does this person's persona fit with everybody else that I have? And we've gotten away from that, okay? Without getting too deep here, we've spent many years now in society talking about the right kinds of people to hire and so on. I think we've gotten away from, given everything about this person, how do they fit with the team? They may have a certain type of personality that just fits or doesn't fit. Their way of thinking may not fit. The way they speak, the way they come across, their behavior. So you really, and I used to love this as a leader, trying to, I'm sure you did as a basketball coach. Okay, which player would be the greatest guy to come off the bench in this situation?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just, so it's really, you come back to, I love basketball, I'm a Warriors fan. So even though it's difficult these days,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I love having just a set amount of people. Probably why I like football or basketball more than football and baseball, because there's less players, and you really
Yeah.
have to figure out what you do with them. It's the same process you have to go through as a leader at work.
That's a great point. I'll just give you a little basketball
Yeah,
example.
please.
With when we were designing different things, for example, taking the ball out of bounds. When I first started coaching, I assumed that everyone could take the ball out of bounds. And I quickly realized that was not a good idea. And when you go through practice, sometimes a skill that you think is pretty basic is
Mhm.
not so basic for everyone. And you got to make sure, because at the end of the game, you got the wrong guy throwing the ball in bounds, he throws it to the wrong team, and that's not a good thing. So
Great
it's a
point. There you
really
go.
good point. Yeah.
And when it comes to leadership, sometimes there is a crossover between that and mentorship, as you talk about. Tell us how important that mentorship and coaching piece is in the humanistic leadership model.
You have to have it. If you have someone who's a great leader, good at inspiration, but not too good at structure and goal setting, then it doesn't matter how excited you get, you don't know what you're supposed to do, how you're being measured. But even if you have a great leader who's inspirational and a great manager who's sets goals and measures your progress, if you don't have the third piece, the coach, someone who's just there to listen, then you're going to feel like nobody believes in me. A quick story: I had a boss, one of my first bosses. He was this real tall guy. He was like 6'8", and nobody really liked him because he didn't talk much. And when I met with him, he wouldn't even look at you. He would just look out the window. And of course, you just keep talking. And every few minutes, he would wave his hand, which meant stop talking. And he would ask a question. Have you thought of this? And I would be like, oh my gosh, thank you. I never thought about that. And he would go, and he would look out the window, and I would keep talking. And then he would turn and say, have you talked to, oh, that's a great idea. And he would, I think he said 8 words during the whole hour meeting. I could have brought a picture of him and not even had him there. No one liked him because he didn't speak. And he was proof that you could be an introverted, quiet leader and get great results.
Mm.
He taught me to believe in myself and through his questions. And I think that's the most important. If you're a parent and your child sees that your actions, your behavior are to help them grow and have confidence and so on and believe in themselves, you really establish a great bond. And the same thing is true in any relationship, especially at work. So I think it's important to. I tell a story in my book about Anthony. I was a track coach when I was 19, and Anthony was this big, beautiful 300-pound Italian kid, came out for the track team, and I was excited. I thought, I have a shot putter finally because I need a shot putter. Except he told me he wanted to run the 100-yard meters. And I said, okay, that's what you want. So he ran in the first race, he ran like a minute and a half,
Wow.
waving to his parents, having a great time. The average time then was about 11 seconds if you were really good, 12 if you were average, 12 seconds. So we set a goal by the end of the term. I want you to run, end of the season, I want you to run 58 seconds. To make a long story short, he gets on the starting line at the championship. He was in the heat by himself, of course, the slower heat. People had gone on to something else. And this time he's running hard. He's not looking at his parents. He crosses the line. He turns at a 90-degree angle and he comes straight at me. He jumps on me. It says, Coach, we did it.
Wow.
We did it. And I still have shivers when I tell that story. That's
Yeah.
coaching. It's about we. It's about shared accountability. It's about we.
I love that story, Dr. Craig. And I got to ask you my final question talking about speaking versus listening, especially in coaching. Would you say a lot of coaches and leaders in general are prone to want to have the answers and therefore end up talking too much with the best intentions? And how do we, if that is the case, how do we change that as leaders to become better listeners?
I think there's a natural inclination when you're a leader, again, parent, boss, friend, older sibling, to always have the right answer. But that's not always the right approach. So we have to learn to be humble. I tell my Gen Z students it's important before 30 to have ego. It raises your self-esteem. When you're at a party, you tell people like what you do versus, who you are. But I tell my students as we get closer to 30 and over 30, it's important to gently push ego aside and be what's called humble. I think we have to be humble. We have to be willing to listen 80% of the time and talk 20% of the time. It's amazing the results that we'll get because most of us are so busy trying to interrupt people who are talking that if you have someone who looks at you, about 60 to 70% of communication is nonverbal. So if you have somebody that is looking at you with supportive eyes and really wants to help you, but doesn't talk much, just ask good questions, you're going to get a lot better results than just talking.
Yeah, well said. Dr. Craig, my last question for you today is, can you give us a story in your coaching practice
Hmm.
where you were working with a leader that was floundering and how you helped him or her?
I worked with an executive many years ago, he was the CEO of a large insurance company, and the board of directors said, if you don't get some help, we're going to fire you, because he was very autocratic. He yelled, he didn't listen, he was demanding, and the insurance company was not getting good results. So grudgingly, they paid me to coach him, and he didn't really want to go. So in the first session, he said, "Look, this is a waste of my time. I don't want to be here. I'm sure you're a nice person. This isn't going to work, but do your thing," he basically said to me. And he was expecting me, I think, to give him theories and exercises. And I just looked at him and I said, Tell me what you want. What do you want to change? Tell me who you are. Tell me your biggest fears. Confidentially, what bothers you about yourself? Are there things about yourself that you wish you could change? How were you raised? We got into some deep stuff, and it was a risk because I wasn't sure if he would answer. But it turns out I got him to be vulnerable. Told me about his divorce and a lot of stuff with his background. And so once he became vulnerable, then he became a good listener and he was coachable. So I think it's important, again, be self-aware, be vulnerable. But often in coaching, you have to help people to become vulnerable. So first you become vulnerable and you help other people become vulnerable. And so it turned out that he turned his company around. We became friends for many years. And that was the toughest initially, but probably the best result I ever had.
Wow. If you're a leader, the humanistic leadership model is something that you got to look into. If you're a leader of any kind, okay, you could just simply be a parent. That's the leadership position, right? The humanistic leader, you got to grab this book. It is definitely worth its weight in gold. Craig, tell us how we can get the book and what we can expect to learn from it.
If you go to my website, drcraignathanson.com, you can learn more about the book and you can certainly purchase the book there. And of course, the book, as always, is available on Amazon, and they'll take most of the profit, so they won't mind.
You got to keep Jeff Bezos alive, right?
Yeah, so Amazon, of course, everywhere, and my website. I think the main message of the book, and that's why the tagline is Humanistic Leadership for the Soul, is that it's really about, it starts from within you. Leadership starts from within you, and it's soulful. It's not religious, it's spiritual. Just like I had to go over my whole life and think about the things that I'd done well, the things that I didn't do so well, and reconcile that, we have to go inside of ourselves first. And I think that's the main message that I tried to portray in this book. I think this book you could read several times, keep it next to you, and use it as a guidebook for how to lead people in more humanistic ways.
All those links down in the show notes to go grab the book and learn more from Dr. Craig Nathanson. And Dr. Craig, are there any ways we can get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, you could email me, craignathanson@gmail.com. I have a phone number. Office number is 707-774-6446. And follow me on LinkedIn. I tend to post 3 times a week these ideas. Hopefully, somewhere out there, they'll make a difference for people. And I expect next year to come up with a new book, which I'm writing, Humanistic Leadership for Gen Z.
Oh, wow.
I'm writing a book to really speak to those 22-year-olds that grew up during the pandemic and a little bit lost right now when it comes to leadership and self-awareness. And so that'll come out in the next, hopefully by the summer. Yeah, stay in contact. I'd love to hear from people.
So cool. Yeah, definitely follow Craig up on LinkedIn. I see his LinkedIn posts all the time. Very much enjoy reading and am encouraged by them. And you learn a lot from a humanistic leader himself, Dr. Craig Nathanson. Thank you so much, Dr. Craig, for coming on today and sharing all these great insights with us.
Always my pleasure, my honor. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Craig. And with this new book coming out, maybe we'll get you on for a third time. So,
Wow, that would be amazing. I'd love to. My pleasure.